Eric disappeared at the top of the structure. Tomas was dragged away by something no one saw. And Claire. Claire destroyed the one thing she was not supposed to touch. Now, only she has returned, but what has returned with her is not just memory. You can still hear the water dripping, they say, down there, in the mine no one wants to mention. Locals in the Norwegian fishing village of Skarns often refer to it as the mouth. They say it swallows the sea when no one is watching. The old mine rests at the edge of town, where the coastal cliffs crumble into the Arctic waters. It's partially collapsed, partially flooded, and entirely forgotten by most. But in Skarns, forgetting is a privilege. And memory is a kind of curse. The mine was once a silver vein, carved open in the 1860s by desperate men seeking to flee the starvation of a post-famine Norway. But deep within the rocks, they found more than silver, they found the cold. Not just temperature, but something else. A kind of silence that grew thicker with every meter drilled. By 1941, after a series of worker disappearances, flooding incidents, and a final, unexplained collapse, the mine was shut down indefinitely. Government reports listed structural instability. The town's priest simply wrote "Good luck Doran." God closed the door. 80 years later, in 2023, a London-based documentary crew specializing in extreme Earth expeditions found their way to Skarns. The team was led by Eric Lowell, a 42-year-old marine geologist with a fascination for abandoned spaces. Alongside him was Claire Ishida, an underwater cinematographer known for her work in volcanic sinkholes, and Tomas Gelda, a Norwegian-born diver who claimed his grandfather had worked the mines. Rounding out the team was audio technician Lucas Phelps and producer Jordan Reyes. The documentary was supposed to explore Europe's most dangerous forgotten caves. The flooded Skarns mine, with its historical weight and rumored underwater tunnels, was their final episode. It would also be their last. Their arrival was met with polite unease. The innkeeper refused to rent them rooms after hearing the purpose of their visit. "That place is not yours to record," she muttered, handing back Eric's credit card. Eventually, they rented a house outside of town, overlooking the frozen coastline. Each morning, mist curled across the rocks like fingers. It was on the third morning that they ventured to the site. The mouth of the mine yawned from the rock face just above sea level. A rusted iron gate hung crooked over the entrance, submerged halfway in seawater. Beyond the gate, dark water stretched inward, reflecting nothing. Eric, with typical bravado, pulled the drone camera from his pack and launched it into the tunnel. The first footage was uneventful. Narrow tunnels, calcified beams, silt floating like dust in a cathedral. But 15 minutes in, something changed. A faint pulsing sound emerged through the audio, barely perceptible, but rhythmic. Like breath echoing down a stone hallway. Lucas, monitoring the audio feed, adjusted the gain and frowned. "You hearing that?" he asked. Claire did. So did Eric. "It's probably machinery buried in the walls," Eric suggested. "Water moves through metal, picks up old vibrations." Lucas wasn't convinced. The pattern had too much intent. It didn't echo like a machine. It echoed like a voice, stuck on one word, looped endlessly. He isolated the sound. Played it back. The word was calm. Come. They prepped the dive the next day. Tomas was the only one who had dived in zero-visibility ice-water caves before. He insisted on laying a guideline the entire way. "If you lose the line," he warned Claire, "you lose yourself." She nodded, but something about his tone lingered in her mind. Their suits were state-of-the-art. Dry suits lined with thermal mesh. Rebreathers with dual-tank redundancy. Headlamps, sonar scanners, wrist-mounted cameras. Everything was accounted for. Still, as they entered the water, Claire felt something tighten in her chest. Not panic, she'd done worse. It was more like the sensation of stepping into a room where someone had just whispered your name. The tunnel narrowed quickly, and after 40 meters, their bodies were pressed between jagged rock and ceiling. The water was cold enough to make thoughts feel sluggish. Visibility was near zero. Only their lights made the void bearable. At 72 meters, the cave opened suddenly. Claire gasped. Not from fear, but awe. They had entered what looked like a sunken hull. The walls were carved, not by machines, but by hands. Runes lined the perimeter. Some were chiseled cleanly. Others were deep gouges, as if clawed. The floor was layered in slate, bones of small animals, and rusted tools from a bygone era. At the center was a column of stone that pulsed with faint phosphorescence, like light trapped beneath its skin. Eric swam toward it, captivated. Lucas kept recording. Tomas didn't move. His eyes were wide. I know this place, he whispered through the comms. My grandfather described it, said this is where the screams stopped. No one responded. They surfaced inside a hidden air pocket just above the chamber. Claire's breath was unsteady. Eric pulled off his mask. This is incredible, he said. We need to go back tomorrow. Explore the second shaft. Lucas glanced at the stone column. We shouldn't have come. Tomas nodded, trembling. There's something about the stone, he said. It's vibrating. Not sound, memory. I saw things, in my head. When I got close. Claire wiped condensation from her lens. What did you see? Tomas looked at her with eyes that no longer seemed entirely his own. The cave remembering us. Back at the cabin, the team reviewed the footage. At minute 43, something strange happened. The column's light flared just briefly, but it wasn't natural light. The frame distorted for a second. And for the briefest moment, the stone runes seemed to move, curling inward like a pupil dilating. Lucas paused the footage. Enhanced the frame. That's not lens distortion, he said. It's the wall. Eric, still riding the high of discovery, laughed. So what? Haunted rocks? Come on. But that night, they all dreamed the same thing, a tunnel with no end, and something breathing in the dark. When Claire woke, her ears were bleeding. By morning, something had changed in Tomas. He didn't speak much during breakfast, and when Claire asked if he was okay, he simply nodded and said, I didn't sleep, but the cave did. Lucas was even quieter. His fingers trembled slightly as he stirred his coffee. He hadn't reviewed the audio files yet, he didn't need to. That whisper from the stone had lodged itself somewhere behind his eardrums. He could still hear it beneath everything else. Like static behind a lullaby. Only Eric seemed unfazed. In fact, he was thrilled. I sent stills of the chamber to a rhinologist in Oslo, he said. He thinks some of the carvings predate Viking expansion. Possibly Bronze Age. He turned to Tomas. Your grandfather must have been referring to something ancient. This isn't just a mine. This is a burial site. A shrine. Maybe both. Or something older than gods, Tomas muttered under his breath. They returned to the cave just after noon, this time with heavier equipment and extra lights. Claire insisted on bringing additional guideline reels. She didn't trust how the tunnels seemed to stretch longer than she remembered. Time had a way of folding down there. They re-entered the stone hall in silence. This time, no one approached the column. They swam past it, into a tunnel marked on sonar as Chamber B. Tomas kept looking over his shoulder, watching the faint pulse of the stone fade behind them. The new tunnel was narrower, steeper, and seemed to breathe. Claire didn't say that out loud, but the thought wouldn't leave her. With every kick of her fins, she swore the water pushed back, gently, like lungs exhaling. At 96 meters, the second restriction appeared. It wasn't natural. A narrow, circular archway carved into a slab of stone, no wider than a man's shoulders. Etched across its top was a symbol Claire couldn't identify. A spiral, ending in a jagged break. "Do we go through?" Eric asked. Tomas looked sick. "We shouldn't. That's the circle's throat. My grandfather warned me of it. He said only things born of silence can pass through." "Perfect," Eric grinned. "Then let's be quiet." He pushed through first. Claire hesitated, then followed, dragging the camera line with her. Lucas came next, breathing too fast. Tomas lingered. And when he finally slipped through, something on the other side seemed to pull him. The second chamber was smaller, domed, and completely dry above the waterline. Bones lined the floor, animal, human, unidentifiable. Hundreds of them. Arranged in deliberate spirals around another stone feature, a pedestal. On it sat a smooth black orb, no larger than a melon. It didn't glow like the column. It didn't vibrate. It did nothing. Until Eric touched it. The moment his fingers met its surface, a blast of pressure rippled through the water. The lights flickered. Claire's mask fogged instantly. Lucas dropped the guideline reel. Eric stood motionless. His mouth opened, but no words came out. His head tilted slowly, unnaturally. Then, in a voice that wasn't his, he spoke. "The stone remembers the sky. The sky forgets the stone." Then he collapsed. They hauled him into the dry chamber and yanked his mask off. Eric coughed violently, spitting water and blood. When he opened his eyes, he seemed dazed. "What happened?" Claire asked. He looked around. "Where are we?" "You passed out," Tomas said. "You spoke." "No, I didn't." Claire checked the footage. It was there. The words. The tilt. The sound. But something was wrong with the video. At the moment Eric touched the stone, the recording warped, frames stuttering, freezing, looping backward. In one of the loops, Claire saw her own face blink at a time when she remembered closing her eyes. They decided to abort the dive and return to the surface. But the tunnel behind them was gone. The restriction they'd come through now appeared solid. No opening. Just stone. The guideline was embedded into the wall as if the tunnel had never existed. Lucas panicked first. He kicked backward, hitting his tank on the wall. "No, no, no, this isn't real. This isn't real." Claire grabbed his shoulders. "Stop. Breathe. We'll find another way." "We can't," Tomas said. "This place, it folds. Like lungs." Claire froze. She hadn't said anything about that. How did he know? They found another passage, steeper and filled with silt. It spiraled downward and curved unnaturally to the left. The guideline had to be reattached. As they swam, the walls began to shimmer, not with light, but with movement. Faces, faint and gray, drifted just beneath the stone's surface. Eyes closed. Mouths open. As if frozen mid-scream. At 118 meters, they reached another chamber. No air pocket. The ceiling was low, and stalactites hung like teeth. Lucas stopped. "I hear her." "Who?" Claire asked. "My sister," he whispered. "She died 5 years ago." "Lucas, there's nothing. I hear her singing. From behind that wall." He began to unclip his tanks. Tomas surged forward and grabbed him. "You do that, you die. She's in there." "She's not." But Claire wasn't sure anymore. Her own comms were filling with whispers. Names. Familiar ones. One voice was her father's. He'd been dead since she was 15. "Claire," it said, "you left me in the lake." She screamed into the mouthpiece. "No. No. You drowned." I couldn't save you. Eric's voice came next, but he wasn't speaking. His lips weren't moving. His mask fogged, but the sound was clear. The stone remembers the sky. The sky forgets the stone. Tomas made a decision. We go forward. No more turning back. They found another exit, narrow and steep, and followed it upward. For a moment, Claire felt the pressure lessen. Maybe they were close to a surface pocket. Then the passage opened into something vast. They floated at the edge of a colossal cavern. The far wall couldn't be seen. The water was perfectly still. The sonar registered nothing. No floor. No ceiling. Just black. At the center stood the largest stone structure they'd seen yet. A pillar nearly 20 meters high. At its peak, a bowl-shaped depression filled with a liquid that shimmered like oil. The whispers stopped. The silence was worse. Eric swam toward the pillar. Claire tried to stop him. Don't touch it. But he was already climbing. The water glowed faintly beneath them. Shapes began to move. Long, slow, serpentine shadows curled beneath the surface. Tomas pulled Claire backward. We don't belong here. Lucas was gone. They looked down. Only 4 bubbles rose. Then 3. Then none. Do you see it now? Eric called from the top of the pillar. He was smiling. There's no stone. No cave. There's only memory. And it's hungry. He stepped forward. And vanished. Only 2 remained. Claire and Tomas drifted just beyond the colossal stone pillar, suspended in an abyss where sound had no edge. Eric was gone. Lucas was gone. The guideline reel was trailing uselessly into the void, cut or pulled, they didn't know which. The water around them had grown unnaturally still. Claire felt it in her throat, in her bones. Even her own heartbeat seemed quieter, as if muffled by the cave itself. Her dive computer blinked erratically, depth readings flickering between 130 and 240 meters. Nothing was stable anymore. Not the light. Not time. Not memory. Tomas tugged her sleeve and pointed upward. There was a slope, a tunnel, angled just enough to swim. Maybe a way out. Maybe a trap. But it was all they had. They kicked forward in silence, following the new path. The walls were now smoother, polished almost, as if worn by something far older than water. As they swam, they passed carvings again, but not in runes. These were faces. Dozens of them. All identical. Featureless, save for open mouths. Claire reached out to touch one. It was warm. At 142 meters, the tunnel forked. Tomas stopped. We have to choose, he said, voice low. Claire looked down both paths. The left glowed faintly, like phosphorescent algae. The right was pitch black. Left, she said. We can see. Tomas shook his head. That's why we shouldn't go. This place gives what it wants to take. They argued. Not loudly. Whisper shouting, like scared children under blankets. In the end, Claire went left. Tomas followed her. After 10 meters, the glow intensified. It wasn't algae. It was the stone. The walls bled with light now, pale blue veins pulsing just beneath the surface, like something dreaming inside. The deeper they swam, the more the light became sound. Not in the ears, but in the brain. A pressure behind the eyes. Words formed without language. Thoughts surfaced that weren't their own. You are remembered. You are remembered. You are remembered. Claire clutched her head. Stop it. But the cave didn't stop. It never stopped. That was the truth she finally understood. This place had no end. Because it was the end. The terminus of memory. The last whisper of every voice never heard. And it wanted her to stay. Suddenly, Tomas screamed. He was thrashing in the water, kicking backward. Claire spun around and saw it, something just behind him. No shape, no form. Just pressure. Density. Like a shadow cast by absence itself. Claire pulled Tomas by the harness, but it was too late. His mask cracked. Blood clouded the water. Then he was gone, sucked downward with impossible force, into nothing. She couldn't scream. Couldn't breathe. Her rebreather hissed, choking. She felt weightless, then heavy. Her limbs moved too slowly. Her thoughts unraveled like old rope. And still the voice echoed. You are remembered. She should have died there. Instead, Claire floated. She doesn't remember how long. When she awoke, if that word even applies, she was lying in a dry cavern, suit half frozen, mask shattered beside her. The chamber was silent. Not quiet, silent. Like the cave had pressed the mute button on existence itself. In front of her stood the final monument. A monolith, carved from obsidian, covered in thousands of names. No languages. Just memory. She knew them all. Her father. Her brother. The boy who drowned in her childhood lake. Her mother's voice during a hospital storm. Every voice she'd ever forgotten. And her own name. At the very bottom. She screamed. But no sound came. The monolith began to crack. Lines spiderwebbed across its surface, light bleeding from the wounds like fireflies trying to escape glass. The ground trembled. The cave inhaled. Claire did the only thing that made sense in that moment. She reached into her tool pouch, pulled a geological pick, and drove it into the heart of the stone. It shattered. And the world collapsed. The next thing she saw was sky. Real sky. Gray. Overcast. Cold wind on her skin. She was lying on the frozen rocks outside the mine entrance. Alone. Her suit was shredded. Her dive computer was fused solid. The tanks were cracked and bone dry. Villagers found her hours later. She didn't speak. Authorities launched an investigation. They recovered nothing. No drones. No gear. No bodies. The cave system was resealed by the Norwegian government within the week. No official reports were released. Claire was hospitalized for weeks. She refused to answer any questions. But sometimes, in the silence between visitor check-ins, she would whisper one word, over and over. Come. 2 years later, a new diving team approached the site. A private expedition. They'd heard rumors, seen the Reddit threads, watched the recovered footage fragments that mysteriously appeared online. They ignored the warnings. They entered the mine. They never returned. Epilogue. A camera was found floating near the Skarns coast last winter. No body. No gear. Just the camera. The footage was mostly static. Except for the last 20 seconds. It showed a dark tunnel, narrowing to a point. The sound of breathing. A voice whispering. The stone remembers the sky. The sky forgets the stone. Then, just before the video cuts. Claire's face. But not as she looked before. Smiling. Waiting.